You just heard Working Man, or Working Man, from Rush, from the self-titled album, Rush Rush. This is the Labor Day special on the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And how did we come to this? We're sitting here on Labor Day weekend, working for you.
That's right.
Working for the working man out there. Mark and I kind of, had a brainstorm a few weeks ago, and we said, we haven't done a holiday-themed episode in a while, and, I'd actually I think it'd be cool if we could find unique ways to do the most, abstract holiday-themed specials rather than...
I think the last one we did was, Halloween or something.
Yeah, or Christmas kind of obvious, or something like that. Yeah, so let's go a little left of center. Let's put together something for Labor Day that addresses the woes of the working man and the sorrow of capitalism and all of the things that that the Labor Day is really supposed to be about.
Yeah,
and because Mark and I have ballied about the idea for quite a while. Of all the older crust stuff that's out there, and older sort of DIY punk and D-beat punk and
80s hardcore and stuff.
Yeah, there's just loads of stuff that sort of exists out there, and then once you kind of start digging around a little bit, you can kind of find some left of center choices. And
you did some digging and kind of really kind of grasping at straws for pulling in some of it, which is be entertaining to people, I'm sure.
Yeah. And again, so that it's not all just D-beat punk for the whole episode, to try and find, like you said, a little left of center kind of choices that actually, once you investigate sometimes the lyrics, sometimes it kind of comes together. And because it is Labor Day and we need to show our value of hard work and labor, we decided to put together actually kind of a 2-part special. So you get 2 episodes essentially in one, so whether
now you really oppressed people have to work on Labor Day. Maybe this can be the soundtrack to your Labor Day.
Exactly. And there's no better way to sort of start things off than with Rush Working Man, which is essentially one of those classic rock tunes that addresses, I guess, what it's like to be
a Canadian
hardworking guy, and they understand labor up in Canada with the with socialism and different things like that.
Yeah.
They've addressed some of those woes maybe, and it's interesting because Labor Day, in America, where I'm sure a lot of our listeners are kind of downloading this episode. I know we have,
or if you're in Europe, you have about 6 weeks of paid vacation, so maybe this isn't quite as poignant as a topic. But
here's what I'll say: when I was in Italy living there, and Labor Day was going on, and one of our one of our valued listeners, Chris True, who was a good friend of ours from the record store days, he actually arrived in Italy to visit me on the day of Italian Labor Day. And Italian Labor Day is way different than it is, say, in America, where you go camping. Italian Labor Day, when he showed up in the Rome train station and stuff, there were communist parades kind of going on, and worker demonstrations and all this stuff. And and this is in a country that already has six weeks paid vacation in the summertime and things like that. So they take labor very seriously in a lot of places, not just in America, but outside, whether it be Canada or Europe or Asia or some of these other places. And so it's a kind of constant issue, and we don't want to get too terribly political, but it's impossible to do a Labor Day episode without addressing a certain segment of humanitarian politics, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And
the underdogs, the blue collars.
Sure. Yeah. And so, this is going to be, yes, it's laboring for Mark and I to be here on an oppressively hot Labor Day weekend, weekend.
It's our Indian summer.
It is. It's starting to look like an Indian summer. It's September 3rd, and it's already kind of cranking. But we're not going to get too heavy into the band backgrounds and histories and things like that, because we just have too much music to play. And so
the stuff that we know we can say, but there's we'll let
the lyrics and the song titles and some of that stuff kind of speak for itself. We'll give you little tidbits here and there. And what's kind of cool about an episode like this too is we get to play a lot of bands that we probably would never have a chance to actually devote entire episodes to. So kind of it becomes like our own little mixtape kind of episode, or episodes, I should say. So, I guess strap in for the ride. It's going to be kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think we're almost completely death metal free.
Yeah, almost. You could argue that when we get to maybe some of the newer Napalm Death, that it has a little elements of
that's
sort of
grindcore,
death metal,
dude.
but it's still in the grind camp, if you will. So we get to play a lot of neat stuff, and we hope
Suffocation talked about labor disputes or something. Maybe
yeah, I know. I mean, come on, where's the great death metal labor albums? That's one of the things I guess that's always separated. For those of you that are new to this scene, that's always separated genres. Like grindcore, like death metal, like black metal. I mean, death metal for the most part dealt with fantasy horror, things like that.
Gore.
It just never really addressed a lot of
except Gorefest, but they were kind of more grindcore as well early on. So.
Social ills and things like that came into death metal at times. I mean, I know Chuck Schuldiner would talk about some of that stuff. And he did. It
was more draped in metaphor and stuff too. That wasn't quite as obvious as a lot of the deep beat crust punk stuff.
Yeah, it's not anything like.
I guess it's immediate.
I hate work from MDC. You're never going to hear Death doing something like that, or Working Men Are Pissed from Minutemen, or some stuff like that. So
I guess we get some dark thrown in. Later on. So
and that's kind of out of the black metal genre. So, but here's what we got kind of coming up in this next set. And I told Mark the way I tried to organize these is somewhat thematically, but I mean, some things just don't really totally fit together. But I think this set fits together pretty well. And it's kind of starting with some of the older, original sort of crusty stuff and D-beat punk stuff from the late 70s, kind of working up into the 80s, kind of giving you a little smattering of history of this kind of stuff. Starting with, I guess, one of the great politico-anarcho punk bands, which is Crass, and a song they've recorded on several different records, including The Feeding of 5,000, and it's Do They Owe Us a Living? And
1978, dude.
1978, and I know you and Kevin talked about them on the punk episode a little bit. And
there's actually a really good documentary you can watch. I forget exactly what it's called, but I can put it in the show notes. It's basically just the kind of the history of Crass and the whole commune. They're basically, it's kind of taking the hippie mentality but making it more relevant and not just so sunshine and rainbows, and actually having some kind of political action. And
there was a recent, I think within the last 6 or 7 months, a recent Mojo issue that did an oral history of Crass, which is pretty cool. And if you're looking for a great non-metal magazine, outside of the Decibels and Terrorizers and stuff, I mean, Mojo, you can't go wrong. They have a lot of cool, it's very well-versed history, regardless of genre and stuff.
Yeah, they did a Slayer.
Retrospective and things. And then we're going to kind of jump into back into America with the Germs, the Slave, and of course the Germs, well known for Darby Crash, who died, committed suicide, correct?
So much history.
But Pat Smear came from the Germs, and of course Pat Smear joined Nirvana right at the very end, and then went on and became part of the Foo Fighters and stuff. But and that's from 1979, and you can find that in their collection, MIA Complete Germs. Then we get into a little different type of punk, Minutemen, Mike Watt, and those crazy guys from the Politics of Time EP from '81, Working Men Are Pissed. MDC, which stands for what, Mark?
Millions of Dead Cops, Multi-Death Corporation, Millions of Dead Children. Keep going. They started I think 78, 79 from Texas and kind of migrated into the Bay Area.
Yep. And
now they're in Portland, Oregon.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, they relocated?
Yeah, they have relocated.
Cool. Does Kevin know them then?
Yes.
Oh, cool. That's pretty awesome. That's a guy that did the punk episode, and if you're a longtime listener of Requiem Podcast, and they got a tune called I Hate Work. Then we get into something a little bit obscure from the Bullshit Detector Volume 3, which we've actually featured a song from Bullshit Detector Volume 3 on the two-part Napalm Death Show with Albert. And that's where the original, I guess one of the very first Napalm Death songs ever got.
First recorded ones, yeah.
And that was from 1984.
Which is very Crass-like sounding.
Yeah, well, and Crass was actually the band that put together these Bullshit Detector cops. I think there were 5 or 6 of them maybe throughout the years. And it kind of featured mainly DIY punk type stuff. And it's a band called No Defenses, and I literally know nothing about them. We tried to find a little bit, but can't really do it. I think it's female vocals that sound very kind of Kim Gordon-y, like early Sonic Youth screaming kind of stuff. But name of the tune is called Work to Consume. And then we're going to round things out with a trio of tunes from, I guess you could say, crossover bands. Circle Jerks, Forced Labor from the group Sex record in 86. Hungry Child from Corrosion and Conformity from their famous Animosity record. And then we'll sort of close things out with Amebix's Slave.
Amebix,
I'm sorry. From the Arise.
It is a made-up word, but yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
So it has no roots in it?
It has no meaning.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And that's from their Arise record from 1985. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about those three bands when we come back. So enjoy Do They Owe Us a Living from Crass, and hang on for the ride.
Fuck the bleaching money, is somehow what to say. Man, I stand on nation, why not trust today? That's all I give you shit, drop your in a pit. Try and get up, you can't because they bash your mouth. Then you brought example, of how I must obey. This is not the sample, if that's all you have. Do they owe us a living? Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I fucking know that I rip anymore, but I blow. Used to call me sweet thing, all I put is blind thing. Now that I'm different, you left the best way. You left to see me come out, left to see me dead. Do they owe us a living? Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I fucking know. Living out inside to me, I'm never gonna get. Back at this I won't until it's in there. Give it a bar, mate, something like that. I'm gonna bear me, and for this rock, do they owe us a living? Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I fucking know. Don't take any notice, what the public think. So I say it to me, just don't wanna think. You try to tell me, leave out to the advice. You don't wanna wear it, so you're full of vice. Do they owe us a living? Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I do, owe us a living. Cause I fucking know.
Start your head, move your hand, box start shaking cause you're in demand. Slave to the beat of the news, you can't get laughing stars, die for cars. Slave to the beat of the news, yeah. Oh yeah, pull out Sam, I in my hand. You like to waste it, body slaves to don't run now. You gotta drink, put your hands together, rip and shackle, twist by round, you'll start to crackle. Slave to the beat of the news, you can't get laughing stars, die for cars. Slave to the beat of the news, you can't get, oh yeah, pull out Sam, I in my hand. You like to waste it, body slaves to don't run now. You gotta drink it. Right here, right now, shake it in and out now. Lights on, off now, make it spin and fight now.
happiness or health. You're never paid what you're worth. No family wealth. Soon your wages support the state, support the party. Then you'll scream, forget the state of your pain. Come for me, I'm gonna be free. Come for me, I'm gonna be free. No religion to comfort your mind. The Communist Manifesto will be read all the time. When consumer products cease to exist, that's when the Eastern Bloc defects. Come for me, not gonna be free. Come for me, I think I should be free. Resist them, communism. Resist them, fascism. Resist them, Nazism. Resist them. No.
Living life as an only child. Pushing your hands to sleep and inside. I was up. I'm down with you. Down with you. I'm down with you. Spreading the answer to all your brains. Everything in the complete radio strain. I'm down with you.
Amebix, Slave, Hungry Child from COC, Forced Labor, Circle Jerks, Work to Consume from No Defenses, I Hate Work, MDC, Working Men Are Pissed, Minutemen, The Germs, The Slave, and then we started things off, of course, with Do They Owe Us a Living from Crass.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. That gets like right in your head all the time. You can kind of...
Well, that documentary, they actually do a lot of these kind of segments between where they're interviewing people where they just show the lyrics across the screen and stuff too, so it like really kind of penetrates into your brain after a while.
And the accent's so strong, you know, and snarky in a way. You know,
it's completely snotty British sounding.
Great. But
another thing, Eve Libertine, I believe, did most of the kind of graphic design for that
Crass.
band, and I think that's probably some of the most like the greatest like propaganda punk artwork.
It's very iconoclastic.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I even have a couple Crass pins on my teaching bag. You know, I mean, just great quotes, sloganeering, and all that kind of stuff. You know, and I mean, a perfect band for, you know, I guess the labor movement and just addressing human rights and all the and things.
Penny Rimbold, the drummer, kind of one of the first, I think one of the main consistent guys outside of Steve Ignorant that's been in the band forever, now has like this basically kind of a hippie commune in, I forget exactly where it is in the UK, but just because it's kind of like farming community, basically where people can come in, as long as you have some kind of like skill, you know, be it cooking or music or whatever, you can live there for free and just help out.
Eat off the land. And
there's some really goofy stuff, like them showing how to make like a composting toilet, and Penny Rimbold standing out there, you know, naked with his dick out making this, you know, this toilet. Interesting. Wow. He's pretty much a dirty hippie kind of dude at this point, but it's interesting to see somebody actually carry through that ethic.
I was just going to say they're living, you know, that same,
because they've been offered all kinds of money to like buy up this really nice area for it to be, you know, like some kind of new like condo development thing, and they're basically, you know, they've just been keeping this thing together with, you know, spit and twine.
Just being defiant. That's cool. That's really cool. And part of, I guess, the spirit of the show that we're trying to put together here, you know. So, those last three, I mean, I guess any of those really kind of had some crossover appeal. But,
I mean, Amebix is a goofy band, a really weird band that I think when you hear... I don't know, people have seen their logos and their shirts everywhere, but when you actually hear the band, they're so different than anything else at the time. I mean, you can see how there's a documentary, I think it's just called The History of Amebix on YouTube. You can find it pretty easily. But Steve Von Till and Scott Kelly are interviewed on there, and you can hear a lot of where Neurosis got.
Especially the early Neurosis stuff that had still...
But where you can hear this weird kind of industrial kind of edge coming into Neurosis's thing, you know, kind of vibe as well. Just this weird... Because Amebix was never too overtly political. They were more just this kind of... just like created this mood, almost soundtrack.
They were like Swans or like Godflesh or something. Yeah. And even though they weren't like as industrial as those two bands, but in creating like a, I don't know, like Neurosis creating a mood. You know, I mean, Neurosis isn't like overtly political or anything, but yet like you can almost understand the angle that they approach probably like life and humanity and things like that.
And like, the first couple times, I mean, because the guys from Amebix relatively didn't know how to play instruments at all, which is kind of evident when you listen to some of their early stuff. But the first couple of their shows, they're like, why do we keep sounding different? Because they didn't realize you had to actually tune your instruments.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome.
So that documentary is pretty... The editing's terrible on it, but it's pretty interesting just to see, you know, a band that only put out a couple records, really, and how kind of influential they were, how forward-thinking, and how like naive, really, they were.
Well, weren't they alongside like Siege? I mean, weren't those sort of like anchors that sort of influenced a lot of the sort of British grindcore kind of stuff in a way? Like Amebix, Siege, Repulsion, those were all bands that kind of influenced like Napalm and Extreme Noise Terror and some of the stuff that they were doing.
Oh, sure. And Discharge, I mean, was
Discharge,
the big one. But throwing all those together, you can kind of see where grind really... where I guess a lot of the more weird aspects of grind kind of come out of.
Sure. And I'm just trying to remember where they were from. Were they from the Boston area?
Who's that?
Amebix?
No, they're British.
Are they British?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I
one of the dudes
to link them together with Siege, which was from Boston, but...
I'm trying to think of what the hell the guys... I don't know if it's just Rob. Rob or Stieg, one of the guys now is a swordsmith in the Isle of Man.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome.
It's kind of a bizarre thing, but
Yeah.
But then if you look at all their old artwork, it's just all this kind of weird, almost like silhouette-ish kind of stuff with like, you know, it could be almost like black metal stuff. Actually, the
their
Nails
logo
cover,
is very black
the Nails
definitely.
cover for that new record, where the guy like hanging from the tree or whatever totally looks like an Amebix kind of cover.
Yeah. That's cool. And then, of course, Hungry Child from COC Animosity. That's a record that's gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of years, with Decibel inducting into Hall of Fame.
And that classic lineup touring.
Last summer, the COC toured basically playing Animosity in its entirety and stuff, and then we got the chance to see him at Metal Fest, or Death Fest. So, and then Forced Labor, Circle Jerks. If you don't know Circle Jerks, but you know Black Flag, then you kind of maybe know a little bit more about Circle Jerks, because that's Keith Morris from the original vocalist from Black Flag's band that he started right afterwards. Great name, Circle Jerks. So.
Oh, and when I was like in junior high and first became kind of aware of them, I had no idea what that.
Yeah. So. And
especially when they became a little bit more popular, where you'd hear like songs on the radio and stuff. Hearing somebody say that name on the radio,
that's
kind of
right, Circle Jerks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Probably influential for the name Limp Bizkit. So.
Let's not bring that up.
I know, just kidding. Well, the next set of tunes that we kind of have is all fascinated with the concept of money, and certainly in today's...
How come we don't have Pink Floyd's Money?
Yeah, I know. I thought
that's a little bit too classic. Right?
I know. I was kind of like... I had to design some parameters, because certainly you could go... but money is I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to mention it. Money from obviously Dark Side of the Moon is really a song addressing sort of the dehumanization of like humanity, because of the sort of great desire for greed and capitalism and things like that. Talking about like kind of the modern man and how that sort of like 9-to-5 sort of industrial like lifestyle almost like takes away part of your humanity. Mm-hmm. Pink Floyd was coming, out of like sort of experimental art rock psychedelic circles, but they were definitely political in a sense, in their way. And that's like a good kind of, I guess, starting point for some of the thematics of some of this, this next set, which is this concern, obviously, for money, that we can't avoid it no matter what we want to do, no matter how much you want to kind of try and live off the land or whatever. There's some part or some anchoring that money, I guess, does.
Necessary evil.
Yeah, definitely. And some of these are sort of celebrating kind of work and money and things like that. And some are just more kind of left of center, Don't Need Your Money, and We Are the Road Crew from Motorhead, and then Money from Tigers of Pantang. Don't Need Your Money from Raven.
Yeah, We Are the Road Crew is basically kind of a celebration of camaraderie.
Yeah,
of, the people that work their ass off.
Sure.
On the unsung heroes, I guess, of rock and roll.
Exactly. And the reason I threw Motorhead in with the Raven and the Tigers of Pantang is because they were all sort of late 70s, early 80s. I don't know if you could throw Motorhead into the new wave of British heavy metal, because they were always kind of doing their own thing. But
they often get lumped in there. But
yeah, they were certainly part of it. In the same way that maybe Judas Priest is near that scene, but was like not really exactly part of it. Yeah. Motorhead you could say the same thing. But Raven and Tigers of Pantang, these are two bands we've maybe mentioned before when we talk about the NWO BHM scene. But Raven's Don't Need Your Money comes from their debut from 1981, Rock Until You Drop, and Tigers of Pantang's Money comes from their debut, Wildcat, from 1980. And we've had requests to do sort of like new wave of British heavy metal, I guess, like theme shows and stuff like that. We just did we recorded Angel Witch, which should be coming next week. You'll be able to hear that show, so hopefully that will whet your appetite if you're a new wave of British heavy metal fan out there,
because we really haven't got into it too much outside of Priest. We did the
Witchfinder General
show and Witchfinder General, which Witchfinder General is another band that's just kind of shoehourned in there because they didn't fit any scene, but they're contemporaries.
Sure. And these are sort of, I guess, along the lines of I don't know, everybody's working for the weekend, lover boy kind of stuff. There's nothing too like deeply political about these songs, but it's at the same time it's don't want your money, don't want to be bought off, whatever it is, kind of keeping
respect,
your
integrity.
Values. Yeah. There's some of that. And then of course, as you said, We Are the Road Crew from Motorhead is kind of a celebration of the hard work that people are doing behind the scenes, like you said, the unsung heroes and stuff like that. Then we get a little bit more political with the Replacements from Stink from 1982 with Goddamn Job. Yes, I need a goddamn job. Again, the sort of necessary evil of like, God, I wish I could again, exist outside these corrupt values of greed and capitalism, but sometimes you're just dragged down into it.
I moved to Norway or Sweden.
Yeah, there you go. And then Mastodon makes their first appearance. They'll be on here a couple times. And this comes from an oddity that I just sort of, in doing some research, came across. I didn't even know this existed until a couple weeks ago. It's from
something that was like attached to a magazine or something?
Well, Warner Brothers put this out. It's called Covered, A Revolution in Sound, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Warner Brothers stuff.
Okay.
And it's a cover of ZZ Top's Just Got Paid, and it actually features Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top. And, I don't know what ZZ Top record it was originally on or anything like that, but kind of fun, and Mastodon certainly fits into the genres that were, the music that we're sort of looking for. And, Just Got Paid, I mean, say no more, Then we get DRI's, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, from their debut, I think, Dirty Rotten LP. I think that's their first record.
I believe so. But
from 87 with Money Stinks. So obviously letting you know how much they love their, having to deal with money and jobs and things like that. And then we're going to kind of close things out with the first of a trio of songs that don't necessarily deal with money, but deal with
authority.
The authority figure you have to answer to, unfortunately, in the labor market.
Yes.
And that's a Doom song that we'll talk a little bit more about when we come back with Beat the Boss. So enjoy a trio of new wave and British heavy metal tunes, and then leading into some other punk and metal stuff on the Labor Day stuff. So enjoy Don't Need Your Money from Raven.
Trying to change my life when I just want to relax. Daddy trying to change my life when I just want to relax.
face, another truck, another race. I'm eating junk, feeling bad. Another night I'm going mad. My woman's leaving, I feel sad. But I just love the life I lead. Another beer is what I need. Another gig, my ears bleed. We are the road crew. Another town I've left behind. Another dream completely blind. Another hotel I can't find. Another backstage bus for you. Another tube of super glue. Another border to get through. I'm driving like a maniac. Driving way to hell and back. Another room, a case to pack. We are the road crew. Another hotel we can burn. Another screw, another turn. Another Europe map to learn. Another truck stop on the way. Another game that I can play. Another word I learn to say. Another blasted customs post. Another bloody foreign coast. Another set of scars to boast. We are the road crew. That's right.
Hey, come over here. Now I've got money for you. Do you believe that's true? Now I've got money in the bank. Hey, well that's a prank. And I've got money for two. Do you believe that's true?
I stayed at home today, and I'm not going back to work. Money stinks, the city stinks. Smell the power, smell the hell, smell my fear, my breath as well. I'm believing you get one, nobody birthday. Money stinks, the city stinks. Smell the logic, smell the brain. They just call the crooked eye. Run my gut, run my mouth, run the shit that's in your money. Money stinks, the city stinks. Money stinks, the city stinks. Do you know why the city stinks? I'll tell you why the city stinks. Nobody goes out there we breathe, nobody goes out there we need. No profit, no success, no back to the money way. No start, no scope, no accomplishment. No people spend no set, no frost, no mindset. No who's, no effect, no that there's no money man. No success, no death, no achievement, she went best. Money stinks, the city stinks.
That was Beat the Boss from Doom. Money Stinks, DRI. Just Got Paid from Mastodon. Goddamn Job, The Replacements. Money from Tigers of Pantang. And We Are the Road Crew, Motorhead. And of course, we kicked things off with Ravens, Don't Need Your Money. One thing we when we were kind of doing a little bit of research that we forgot to mention is you kind of asked the question, we're like, why the hell does Tigers of Pantang spell Tigers, Tygers? And apparently it comes from Michael Moorcock's Elric novels, and the Wizards of Pentang have these animals called tigers that they spell that way.
Yeah, it's very flamboyant.
Yeah, pretty odd reference, but hey, it works. You know.
Oh, that name forever. You know, as a kid, I just completely turned me off because it sounded lame and fantasy and
sure
wizard and warlock kind of crap. But
yeah, and now a lot of the metal you listen to is fine. Wizard and warlocks, and
it doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah. But Doom, what we sort of close things off. Doom's a band that's near and dear to your heart. Certainly.
Yeah, UK, kind of crusty anarcho band that they put out a bunch of the whole Total Doom that Peaceful put out in '89 was kind of a collection of EPs and all that kind of stuff as well. They're a band that there's not really that much to say about except they're really enjoyable.
Yeah, they did a great job this summer at Maryland Death Fest.
Yeah, they had like the biggest pit interaction. There was like the largest pit, basically encompassed the entire state or the entire floor of the venue there
of the indoor stage,
and it was just nuts how like into how people were like super into these guys when really nobody really knew much, because Doom on the Peaceful roster really kind of stood out outside of like electro hippies. There wasn't a ton of more crusty sounding, more punk rooted music on Peaceful. It was more of a kind of an avant-garde death metal Doom label at that point, but they always kind of stood out a little bit, and that was one of the earlier bands that kind of got me into the whole scene of extreme noise terror and Chaos UK and all that kind of stuff.
Speaking of holiday themed episodes, you actually introduced me more or less to Doom when we did our Santanic Christmas.
Say how did we Santanic?
I can't remember. I think it was Santanic.
Yeah, Satanic Offerings.
Satanic Offerings, yeah, where we were essentially playing songs for each other to see if we could giving each other Christmas gifts.
Yes.
And seeing if
The
we
gift
could,
of new music.
Yeah, the gift of new music. And one of the things that Mark played me was Doom, and I had always heard the name and probably even seen the cover like in Peaceful ads and different things, but I never actually owned any Doom until then. So
well, it was the one band on Peaceful that was not Doom at all.
yeah, exactly, which is ironic, you know, for a label so closely associated with Doom.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, and Beat the Boss, that may have been the song you played.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't.
I mean, that was a long time ago, but
yeah, and many of their songs are quite similar.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that's kind of the point of the genre, I think. But
yeah.
Most of these bands play about, you know, if they're on stage 25, 30 minutes, that's it's the energy more so than necessarily having a really recognizable like sound.
Sure. And if you like Doom, they're still kind of putting new stuff out lately. They just put out a new 7-inch that we
and a 10-inch.
Yep, that we picked up.
They did like a 5-date U.S. tour.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just glad, you know, that those bands are kind of existing and still have like a viable fan base that is kind of keeping them afloat. Because, like I said, I was incredibly surprised at the reaction that they got. You know,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, and my buddy Kevin, he saw him out in Oakland.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Okay.
So, and it was like basically pulling people out of the woodwork. You know, came out to see him. So, I think this kind of style of music is due for a little bit of a resurgence. I don't know how many bands. I mean, there's a handful of, you know, like Tragedy and some of these other younger bands that are coming in and filling in that void. But I don't know about really, really young bands if that's something that's ever going to be, you know,
yeah, or if it's
like you can't really like, you know, popify this stuff at all or make it more listenable. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it could be. I mean, it's like thrash is kind of going through like its retro sort of phase right now. But you're right. You know, I mean, you sort of need a certain level of like political awareness in order to pull like this off with any sort of
integrity.
Yeah, integrity and validity. You know, like people are gonna see through you right away. You know, like thrash can get away with
just being fun,
a hipster kind of quality to it on some ways. You can't really get like a hipster D-beat crusty kind of stuff because the fans are so passionate that like no one's really going to be able to like glob onto that unless there's a trueness to what they're doing. Yeah,
I don't know. Well, maybe somebody can do some kind of anarcho thing that's just completely about partying.
Yeah, that could be.
Who knows? But I mean, the last kind of big injection of this we saw, it was like early Swedish death metal, where all the breakdowns were all, you know, D-beat stuff as well. Stuff. And, you know, both Thrower and Napalm and the first kind of wave of grindcore stuff too.
Well, and certainly like some of those guys from that scene have, you know, like Dysphere and stuff have like put together like supergroup versions or, you know, like Lockdown or Lockup. Excuse me.
Skid System.
Yep, stuff like that. So I mean,
Sweden's always been a big proponent of the D-beat for sure.
Yeah, and going back, like you said, to Entombed, using a lot of those you know, breakdowns and stuff like
Dismember and Nihilist and everybody else.
But, you know, speaking of beating the boss, we're going to kind of close part one off today with a pair of tunes that address the similar authority figure of the boss and what he represents, you know, even historically. You know, going back to like Marx and stuff like that, this idea of the sort of factory boss as like a slave driver, you know, like whipping the sort of dehumanized workers through like the mechanisms of industrial life. You know, you go to like things like, you know, Metropolis, which we'll talk a little bit more in part two when we talk about dehumanization with, you know, the industrial metal and some of that stuff. Certainly no one would argue that the boss as an authority figure is, you know, can represent like, you know, tyrannical evil or something like that.
Yeah, it's usually, I mean, when you hear the name boss, it's not something that usually fills you with like fostering goodwill and, you know. No. Generally not, but.
And of course, you know, you get thematically with this summer.
Well, that's why at Target now they don't call them bosses, they're team leaders.
They're team leaders, yeah. It's all about sloganeering. Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
But you had
Imagineers.
You had Horrible Bosses come out this summer, which is appropriate for this thing, you know, which is all about trying to like murder your bosses because they're terrible, you know, and they make your life miserable. So, you know, Doom suggested to beat the boss. But these last two songs, one kind of identifies and is almost calling out the boss, and you know, with the tune's called "Big Strong Boss" from the Swans from their 1983 kind of famous record "Filth," which is very, you know, pre pre-Godflesh, industrial, very mechanical. It's not necessarily metal, but it's certainly not college rock either. It was somewhere in this dark realm in between extreme,
it was kind of a pretty good crossover band as far as they didn't really have a genre.
kind
of themselves.
And even though like lyrically Big Strong Boss is pretty repetitious, I feel like this is like a song that the way that the music and the way that it's sung, it's almost like trying to dismantle the boss from his like kind of podium, by kind of oh, you're such a big strong boss, but like kind of tearing him down a little bit, and tearing him down to the point where then you can get to the next song, which is of course the always cheery I Hate God from their very famous Take His Need at Pain record from 10 years later, from 1993, with Kill Your Boss, and typical cheery stuff from I Hate God, who also featured on that record some cheery tunes like Sister Fucker and Sister Fucker Part 2. So I Hate God's never pulled any punches with I don't know if I would even call it politics, but maybe good taste. They're
tasteless, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah, they're kind of known.
They're filth.
Yeah, it's like a Southern Gothic white trash, like gummo kind of music or something like that. It fits that aesthetic of like almost like the show opener to like True Blood or something. Yeah, where like it's just like, it's creepy, it's in the South, it's in New Orleans, it's just like there's swampiness to it, and like meth heads and like all kinds of weird stuff happening. And I Hate God's telling you to go out and kill your boss, so. And they're a band that's obviously due sometime for us to do an entire show about, and certainly Mark and I are not opposed to that. It's just a matter of, when it kind of becomes convenient or necessary. But this is a kind of nice little introduction. And speaking of, Doom playing Maryland Death Fest 2 summers ago, I Hate God did. And that was actually a really nice treat. I think we mentioned, because
it was a nice change with how kind of oppressive some of the other bands previously were.
It was really hot, I remember, and I found shade that day during I Hate God, but it was like very like a very sliver of like shade. We had to almost hide behind a tent and like angle, like watching the stage. But there was a couple guys that like passed out during I Hate God's set because of the heat, or probably a combination of heat and drugs.
Right when the sun is basically kind of at a 45-degree angle, just burning you down. So
brutal. So, but so let us know what you thought. Obviously, part 2 is going to be kind of accompanying this pretty closely, whether it's a day or two, near, depends on editing and stuff like that. Because there are a lot of songs that we're playing, and it takes a while to put some of this stuff together. But hopefully, I had some fun, enjoying some of the politics of labor and the fun music that goes with this unsung holiday that's out there.
Oh, we could have had Helmet unsung.
Oh, we could have. Yeah, we could have. We could have opened this wide. I had to eliminate a lot of choices, because it started to get overwhelming after a while. Like Dead Kennedys, I was going to put Kill the Poor and things like that, but it's like, Jesus, got to cut something off somewhere. Yeah. But we had a lot of fun doing this part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Maybe you're listening to these back to back. So
hopefully you're listening to it at work.
Hopefully you are listening to it at work. And don't kill your boss, because you'll probably get arrested. But at least you can stand up to your big strong boss. You can show him that you're not going to be a pushover, and that you're an important cog to the wheel of the labor mechanism.
Well, and you're also an important part of this podcast, because without this, it'd be more difficult if you did not have the generous contributions.
Absolutely.
For listeners like you. So thanks for your contributions.
We appreciate those of you out there that do want to support the show by making donations and becoming an executive producer and things like that.
By leaving star ratings on iTunes, by telling your friends about it, by talking about it on forums. All that stuff's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so check us out on Facebook, Mark and Jason. Check us out, as Mark said, on iTunes and things. You can also check us out at the website, requiempodcast.com. Shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com if you have requests or comments or things like that. We always appreciate kind of hearing from you. So for part 1 of the Labor Day special, I am Jason.
And I'm Mark.
So enjoy Big Strong Boss and Kill Your Boss.